You thought your soulmate didn't love you. The truth will shock you. My beloved child, don't scroll, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you understand the silence, the distance, and every confusing moment between you and the person your heart has never been able to forget. Listen to this. This message is for you, especially if you have spent nights asking yourself, if they really cared about me, why didn't they show it? Why did they become distant? Why did they leave me wondering? Why did I feel such a powerful connection while they acted like nothing was happening? Your heart needs this right now, because there is something deeper beneath the surface, something you may not have been able to see while you were standing inside the pain. You thought your soulmate didn't love you because you measured their feelings by their silence. You looked at the messages they didn't send, the conversations they avoided, the emotions they refused to explain, and you naturally assumed that their heart had moved somewhere else. But my beloved child, sometimes silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence is where fear hides. Sometimes a person pulls away because a connection has awakened something inside them that they do not yet know how to carry. And that is what makes this revelation so important. Your soulmate has been confronting emotions that became much stronger than they expected. They thought they could control this connection. They believed that if they created enough distance, stayed busy enough, surrounded themselves with distractions, and convinced themselves that what they felt for you was temporary, eventually the feeling would disappear. But it didn't. Don't scroll. You need to hear what happened next, because every time they tried to mentally close the door on you, something seemed to open it again. A song would play and suddenly your face would enter their mind. They would hear a phrase you used to say. They would walk past a place that carried an emotional memory. They would wake from a dream with that strange feeling that you had somehow been close to them. They would pick up their phone without understanding why, only to realize that a part of them was hoping to see your name. And there were moments when repeating numbers appeared during those thoughts: 1111, 222, 333, 444, even 555, and whether those numbers were spiritual signs or simply moments that made them pause and reflect, they became impossible for your soulmate to ignore because they kept appearing around the same emotional questions. Why am I still thinking about this person? Why does their absence feel different? Why can't I simply move on? Listen to this, because this is where the awakening begins. Your soulmate may have looked calm on the outside while fighting an entirely different battle internally. They may have laughed with other people, gone through their normal routine, posted online, worked, traveled, or appeared perfectly fine, but there were quiet moments when the mask disappeared. And in those moments, they had to confront the truth that your presence changed something inside them. You weren't simply another person passing through their life. You became a mirror. You reflected emotions they had avoided, wounds they had buried, hopes they had stopped allowing themselves to imagine, and fears they never wanted anyone to discover. My beloved child, your heart needs this right now. You did not need to be perfect to have an impact on this person. Something about your authenticity reached them. Maybe it was your kindness. Maybe it was how deeply you listened. Maybe it was the peace they felt around you. Maybe it was the way you understood things they never had to explain. Whatever it was, it created an emotional imprint that distance could not easily erase. But there is another side to this message, and you need to hear it clearly. Someone having feelings for you does not automatically mean they know how to love you correctly. Someone missing you does not mean you should accept confusion forever. Someone experiencing a spiritual awakening does not mean you should abandon your boundaries while waiting for them to figure themselves out. This message is not telling you to chase. It is telling you to understand. Because the universe may be shifting your attention away from, "Do they love me?" and toward a much more powerful question, "Am I receiving the kind of love I deserve?" Don't scroll, because that question is part of your awakening too. You have been changing. The person you were when this connection first entered your life is not exactly the person listening to these words now. Something has become stronger inside you. You have survived uncertainty. You have learned what silence can do to a heart. You have discovered how exhausting it feels to constantly interpret mixed signals. And slowly, perhaps without realizing it, you started developing a deeper relationship with yourself. You began recognizing that your worth cannot rise and fall depending on someone else's attention. You began understanding that destiny should never require you to beg. Divine timing should never become an excuse for emotional neglect. Real connection eventually asks for real courage. And while you have been learning that lesson, your soulmate has been facing one of their own. They have begun realizing that avoiding their emotions did not free them from those emotions. It only made those emotions louder. Listen to this. There may have been a recent moment when something shifted dramatically inside them. Perhaps they saw something that reminded them of you. Perhaps someone asked them a question they weren't prepared to answer. Perhaps they encountered another person and suddenly realized that the emotional depth they experienced with you wasn't easy to replace. Or maybe nothing dramatic happened externally at all. Maybe they simply found themselves alone one night, surrounded by silence, and your memory arrived so strongly that they could no longer pretend it meant nothing. And in that moment, a question surfaced. What if I misunderstood this connection? What if I pushed away someone who actually mattered to me? That question changed something. My beloved child, this message is for you because what came after that question was not comfortable for them. They began replaying moments between you. Conversations. Eye contact. Things you said that seemed small at the time but carried a different meaning in hindsight. They remembered occasions when you tried to understand them and they responded by shutting down. They remembered times when you needed reassurance but received uncertainty instead. They remembered moments when they almost told you the truth and then allowed fear to close their mouth. And suddenly, they were not simply remembering you. They were seeing themselves. They were recognizing patterns. That is part of spiritual awakening, when a person stops blaming circumstances and begins looking inward. Your soulmate started noticing that some of the distance between you may not have been caused by a lack of feeling at all. It may have been caused by fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of losing control, fear of repeating an old heartbreak, or fear of admitting that another human being had become emotionally important to them. Don't scroll. The truth gets deeper here. There may be a reason this connection activated so many emotions in both of you. Soulmate connections are often romanticized as effortless, but meaningful connections can also expose what needs healing. They can show us where we are afraid. They can reveal the walls we built after disappointment. They can force us to ask whether we are choosing from love or protecting ourselves through fear. You awaken something in this person, but they also awaken something in you. You started questioning what you truly want from love. You started realizing that chemistry alone is not enough. Intensity alone is not enough. Signs alone are not enough. You want emotional safety. You want honesty. You want someone whose actions make their intentions clear. And the universe may be using this chapter not merely to bring you toward another person, but to bring you toward a stronger version of yourself. Your heart needs this right now. If you have been seeing 111, allow it to remind you to become conscious of the thoughts you are feeding. If 222 keeps appearing, let it remind you to seek balance rather than forcing an outcome. If 333 catches your eye, let it become a moment to reconnect with your inner wisdom. If you see 444, let it remind you to build stability inside yourself. And if 555 appears during a season of uncertainty, let it symbolize that change may be unfolding and that you do not need to fear every ending or transition. These numbers do not have to predict another person's actions to hold meaning for you. Sometimes the sign is not saying, "They are coming tomorrow." Sometimes the sign is saying, "You are becoming ready for truth." And my beloved child, truth is exactly what is beginning to rise around this connection. Your soulmate has reached a point where pretending has become harder than acknowledging what they feel. The emotional wall they built is beginning to crack, but there is something they are afraid to admit. Listen to this, because this is where your story takes a turn. They are not only afraid that you might reject them. They are afraid that they may have waited too long. Somewhere inside them is the realization that while they were trying to understand their emotions, you were learning how to live without their validation. While they were hiding, you were healing. While they were delaying, you were becoming stronger. And now they can sense that the version of you who once might have accepted almost any explanation is disappearing. You are becoming someone who needs consistency. Someone who respects their own peace. Someone who can love deeply without abandoning themselves. That transformation changes everything, because your soulmate can no longer assume that the door will remain open forever. Don't scroll, because there is an emotional realization they have been struggling with. Losing access to you is not the same as losing an ordinary connection. The thought of you truly moving forward has begun creating a feeling they cannot easily explain. Maybe jealousy appeared. Maybe regret appeared. Maybe an unexpected sadness surfaced when they imagined you laughing with someone else, building a life with someone else, giving someone else the tenderness they once received from you. And that feeling forced them to confront something they had avoided for too long. They may have been telling themselves, "I just need time," but another voice inside them began asking, "How much time do you think you have?" This message is for you. The universe does not need you to manipulate this situation. You do not need to post something just to make them jealous. You do not need to send a mysterious message hoping they will react. You do not need to chase signs or force communication. Your power is in remaining aligned with your truth. If this person is meant to step toward you, let them step toward you with honesty. Let their actions reveal their growth. Let them show you whether their awakening has become maturity or whether it is simply another temporary wave of emotion. Because you deserve more than hidden feelings. You deserve love that knows how to stand in the light. My beloved child, there is another revelation here. Your soulmate may have spent a long time believing that emotional control meant emotional strength. They thought ignoring you would make them stronger. They thought suppressing their feelings would protect them. But now they are beginning to understand that real strength may be saying, I care. Real courage may be admitting, I was afraid. Real growth may be looking at someone and saying, I handled this badly, and I understand why you were hurt. And this realization has been building quietly. Listen to this. There may be conversations happening inside their mind that you know nothing about. They imagine what they would say if they had one completely honest moment with you. They rehearse explanations and then reject them because they sound like excuses. They wonder whether you would believe them. They wonder whether you still feel anything. They wonder whether you have already emotionally closed the chapter. And there is one question that seems to frighten them more than all the others. What if they finally stopped waiting for me? Don't scroll. That question may be exactly what pushes this connection toward its next turning point. Because fear can keep someone silent for a long time, but sometimes the possibility of permanent loss becomes stronger than the fear of vulnerability. Your soulmate is approaching that emotional crossroads. One direction allows them to remain comfortable, silent, and protected while risking losing something meaningful. The other direction requires them to become vulnerable, speak honestly, and accept that they cannot control your response. And my beloved child, whichever direction they choose, you are still moving forward. That is important. Your destiny is not imprisoned inside another person's decision. Your spiritual path does not stop because someone is confused. The universe is guiding you toward clarity, peace, emotional reciprocity, and a kind of love that does not leave you constantly wondering where you stand. If your soulmate is capable of meeting you there, their actions will eventually reveal it. If they are not, your growth will still carry you toward something healthier. Your heart needs this right now, because you may have been interpreting this entire chapter as rejection when it was also preparation. You were being taught to recognize the difference between being wanted and being valued, between emotional intensity and emotional availability, between waiting from intuition and waiting from fear. You were being reminded that your heart is sacred territory. Not everyone who feels something for you automatically deserves unlimited access to it. And something tells me that you are finally beginning to understand that. That is why the energy around this connection feels different now. You are no longer standing exactly where your soulmate left you emotionally. You have moved. You have grown. You have awakened. And strangely, that may be the very thing forcing them to awaken too. Listen to this, because the next truth is the one they never expected to face. They thought you would always be there. They thought there would always be another chance, another conversation, another opportunity to explain themselves. But now they are beginning to sense that divine timing does not mean unlimited timing. Opportunities can change. People can heal. Hearts can release what once felt impossible to release. And your soulmate is realizing that if they have something real to say, eventually they must say it. If they have love to offer, eventually they must demonstrate it. If they regret the distance, eventually they must take responsibility for creating it. Don't scroll, because there is one final piece you need before this message ends. Something has been sitting heavily on their heart, something deeper than, "I miss you." It involves why they pulled away in the first place, what they were truly afraid would happen if they allowed themselves to love you openly, and why your connection triggered a part of their past they thought they had already healed. They have not told you this. They may not have told anyone. But this hidden truth explains more than you realize, and once it comes into the light, you may finally understand why someone who seemed so distant was internally struggling with feelings they could never completely silence. My beloved child, stay grounded. Do not chase the revelation. Let truth come through truth. Let action speak. Let your intuition be balanced by wisdom. Keep choosing yourself while remaining open to genuine love. Because you thought your soulmate didn't love you. But the real question was never simply whether love existed. The real question was why they were so afraid of what loving you would require them to become. And the answer to that question is where everything changes. My beloved child, don't scroll, because the answer to that question is beginning to rise from a place your soulmate has kept hidden for far too long, and what you are about to hear may explain why someone who felt so much could show you so little. Listen to this, because their fear was never simply about loving you, their fear was about what loving you would force them to confront inside themselves. The moment this connection became real, something happened that they were not emotionally prepared for. You began reaching places in their heart that they had protected for years. Old disappointments surfaced. Memories they thought they had buried started returning. Promises they once made to themselves, promises like, "I'll never let anyone get that close again, I'll never give someone the power to hurt me again, and I'll never lose myself in love again," suddenly came into conflict with what they were feeling for you. Your heart needs this right now, because you may have interpreted their hesitation as rejection when, in reality, your presence was exposing a battle between the love they wanted and the protection they had built around themselves. They wanted closeness, but closeness frightened them. They wanted honesty, but honesty required vulnerability. They wanted to tell you what you meant to them, but admitting that truth meant acknowledging that they could lose you, and somewhere inside their emotional history, loss had already taught them to fear attachment. My beloved child, this does not excuse the confusion they created, but it may explain why their actions seemed so contradictory. One day they could feel incredibly close, and the next they seemed distant. One moment their eyes, their energy, or their words seemed to reveal everything, and then suddenly they would retreat behind silence. You wondered whether you imagined the connection. You wondered whether you were reading too much into it. You may even have questioned your own intuition. But don't scroll, because something has changed now. The very strategy they used to protect themselves, distance, is beginning to hurt more than vulnerability ever did. They thought pulling away would bring relief. Instead, the silence created an empty space where thoughts of you became louder. They began realizing that avoiding you did not remove you from their heart. It only removed the opportunity to experience your presence. And that distinction has been haunting them. There have been moments when they wanted to reach out, when their fingers may have hovered over a phone, when they considered sending a simple message, perhaps something casual enough to hide the emotion underneath it. But then fear returned. What if they don't answer? What if they've changed? What if they finally understand their worth and no longer want what I was offering? Listen to this. That last question is becoming increasingly difficult for them, because your energy has shifted. Whether they can physically see it or not, you are no longer emotionally standing in the same place. You have been learning how to stop measuring your value through their attention. You have been learning that someone else's inability to communicate does not make you difficult to love. You have been learning to protect your peace without closing your heart. And this is part of your spiritual awakening. Maybe you've noticed repeating numbers again. Perhaps 111 appears when you are thinking about a fresh beginning. Maybe 222 catches your attention when you are struggling between patience and letting go. Perhaps 444 appears during moments when you need stability, or 555 shows up when you can feel change coming but cannot yet identify its direction. My beloved child, allow these moments to remind you to return to yourself. Signs are not commands to chase another person. They can become invitations to pause, listen inward, and ask whether your choices are aligned with the kind of love you truly want. This message is for you because the greatest shift in this soulmate connection may not be happening outside you yet. It may be happening within both of you separately. Your soulmate is being confronted with the consequences of emotional avoidance, while you are being confronted with the power of self-respect. And when those two awakenings meet, something has to change. Don't scroll, because your soulmate has begun remembering details about you that they never expected to miss. Not just dramatic memories, but small things. The way you responded when they were struggling. The sound of your laughter. The way you noticed when something was wrong even when they said they were fine. The comfort of being understood without having to explain every detail. They remember something you said casually that suddenly carries more meaning now. They remember the emotional safety you tried to create, and they are beginning to understand how rare that felt. They may have assumed they could find the same feeling somewhere else, but comparison has taught them something uncomfortable: people are not interchangeable. Connections cannot simply be recreated because someone is afraid to honor the original one. And now, when they encounter something beautiful, something funny, something difficult, or something meaningful, there may be a part of them that instinctively thinks about telling you before reality reminds them that the distance between you exists. Your heart needs this right now, because that distance has become a mirror for them. It is showing them what their silence created. But my beloved child, remember this: their regret is not your responsibility to fix. Their awakening is not your assignment. Their healing cannot become another reason for you to put your life on hold. If they return, they must return with something more substantial than emotion. They must return with clarity. They must return with accountability. They must return prepared to communicate in ways that do not leave you decoding every sentence. Because you are no longer asking for potential, you are learning to look for consistency. Listen to this, because that lesson is changing the entire dynamic. Your soulmate may have once believed that the connection would remain available no matter how long they avoided it. Now they are beginning to realize that your heart is not a waiting room. You are a person with dreams, choices, boundaries, and a destiny that continues whether they participate in it or not. That realization has created urgency inside them. Something recently may have made this especially clear. Maybe they heard something about you. Maybe they noticed a change in your behavior. Maybe you stopped reaching out. Maybe you stopped reacting in the way they expected. Maybe you simply became quieter, and for the first time, your silence reflected their own behavior back to them. Whatever triggered it, something made them wonder whether you were truly beginning to move on, and the emotional reaction surprised even them. Don't scroll. They may have felt a sudden heaviness, jealousy, panic, or regret, not because they own you, because they do not, but because the possibility of losing the connection became real. For a long time, losing you was theoretical. Now it feels possible. And sometimes possibility is what finally wakes a person up. My beloved child, they began asking themselves questions they avoided before. Why didn't I say what I felt when I had the chance? Why did I make them question themselves? Why was I so determined to appear unaffected? What was I actually protecting? And eventually they reached the question that changed everything. Was I protecting myself, or was I sabotaging something I secretly wanted? Listen to this, because that question opened a door. Your soulmate started recognizing that some of their strongest defenses were created by experiences that happened long before you. Someone may have betrayed their trust. Someone may have made them feel that vulnerability was weakness. Maybe they grew accustomed to relationships where emotional distance felt safer than emotional honesty. Maybe they learned to leave first so they could never be abandoned. And then you arrived carrying an energy that challenged that pattern. You did not necessarily do anything extraordinary. You were simply yourself, but something about being seen by you made hiding harder. Something about your connection asked them to become more honest than they had been willing to become. And my beloved child, that frightened them because real intimacy is not simply being loved for the polished parts of yourself. It is allowing another person to see the frightened parts, the imperfect parts, the parts still healing. Your soulmate worried that if you saw everything, perhaps you would eventually decide they were not enough. So instead of risking being rejected after opening their heart, they created distance before you could get close enough to hurt them. But here is the painful irony: in trying to avoid rejection, they may have created the very separation they feared. Your heart needs this right now. Sometimes people do not lose love because love was absent. Sometimes they lose opportunities because fear remained louder than honesty. And now your soulmate understands that. There is remorse around the moments when they could have reassured you but remained silent. There is regret around the times when they knew you were confused but did not explain themselves. There is a growing awareness that you may have carried emotional pain you never deserved to carry. But don't scroll, because this realization is leading them toward a decision. They know they cannot undo yesterday. They cannot return to every moment and respond differently. They cannot erase every night you questioned yourself. What they can do is decide what kind of person they will become from this point forward. And that decision is becoming increasingly urgent. They are standing between the safety of their old patterns and the vulnerability of a new chapter. One path says, stay quiet. Protect yourself. Maybe the feeling will eventually disappear. The other says, speak. Take responsibility. Tell the truth even if you cannot control what happens afterward. Listen to this. They are beginning to understand that courage does not guarantee the outcome they want. You may have changed. You may require more now. You may need time. You may even decide that this connection is no longer right for you. And strangely, accepting that possibility is part of their growth. Because genuine love cannot be about controlling your response. It has to respect your freedom. My beloved child, this is also why you must remain grounded if communication comes. Do not let one emotional confession erase every lesson you learned. Words can open a door, but behavior determines whether you should walk through it. If someone tells you they missed you, notice whether they also understand how their actions affected you. If they tell you they were afraid, notice whether they are now willing to communicate through that fear. If they tell you they love you, notice whether their love creates peace, honesty, and mutual respect rather than another cycle of uncertainty. This message is for you because you are entering a season where discernment matters more than fantasy. You can believe in meaningful connections while still requiring healthy behavior. You can appreciate spiritual signs without surrendering your judgment. You can love someone and still choose yourself. And that may be the lesson your soulmate never expected you to learn. They may have assumed your deep heart meant you would always wait. Instead, your deep heart is becoming your strength. You are learning that unconditional love does not mean unconditional access. Don't scroll, because there is something else unfolding. Your soulmate may be experiencing an unusual increase in reminders of you. A name similar to yours appears unexpectedly. A song brings back a memory. They see repeating numbers at moments when they are wrestling with whether to communicate. Perhaps 333 appears when they need courage, 444 when they are seeking stability, or 555 during a period of internal change. These moments cannot make decisions for them, but they may be causing them to stop and examine what they have been avoiding. And every time they pause, the same truth returns: this connection mattered. They can change the wording, rationalize it, minimize it, or bury it under distractions, but something meaningful happened between you. My beloved child, meaningful does not automatically mean permanent, and that is precisely why the next decision matters so much. Destiny is not merely about meeting someone. Sometimes destiny is about what two people choose to become after meeting. Your soulmate now has to choose whether this connection will remain a lesson about what fear cost them or become an opportunity to practice the honesty they once avoided. And you have a choice too. You get to decide whether what they offer matches who you have become. Listen to this, because your power has returned to you. You are not sitting helplessly waiting for someone else to decide your future. You are participating in your destiny. You are deciding what kind of communication you accept, what kind of love you welcome, what boundaries protect your peace, and what behavior no longer belongs in your life. That is why this awakening feels different. The old version of you wanted an answer at any cost. The emerging version of you wants truth, even if truth changes the direction of the story. Your heart needs this right now. Truth will not destroy what is genuinely meant to grow. Truth reveals what is capable of growing. And your soulmate knows, perhaps for the first time, that if they come toward you, hiding is no longer an option. They cannot return with half-truths and expect the old dynamic. They cannot give you crumbs and call them destiny. Something inside them understands that the next conversation, whenever it happens, must be different. There is something they need to admit, not only about their feelings, but about the specific moment when they realized they had fallen much deeper than they intended. Don't scroll, because this is the part they have replayed privately. There was a moment when they looked at you, heard something you said, experienced your kindness, or felt your absence, and something inside them quietly admitted, "This person matters to me more than I planned." They panicked after that realization. That may have been when their behavior changed. That may have been when they became harder to read. What looked like a loss of interest may actually have happened around the exact moment their feelings became impossible for them to dismiss. My beloved child, imagine the irony of that. You may have believed they were pulling away because they stopped caring, while they were pulling away because caring had suddenly become frighteningly real. Again, fear does not excuse what happened, but understanding can release you from blaming yourself. You were not necessarily too much. You were not necessarily lacking something. Their withdrawal may have been about a battle you could never have solved for them. And now they are the one who must decide whether they are ready to stop running from that battle. Listen to this. You do not need to rescue them from it. Continue your own awakening. Continue choosing peace. Continue paying attention to what is real, not merely what you hope might happen. Let 111 remind you that new thinking creates new possibilities. Let 222 remind you that healthy connection requires balance. Let 444 remind you to remain rooted. Let 555 remind you that change can arrive without your permission, but growth is still your choice. And when thoughts of your soulmate appear, do not automatically ask, "When are they coming?" Ask, "Who am I becoming?" Because that question protects your power. My beloved child, something is approaching a point of truth. Your soulmate can feel that remaining silent has a cost now. They can sense that the window they once assumed would remain open may not remain open forever. And somewhere beneath their hesitation, they are forming words they once believed they would never say. But there is one detail they have not yet faced completely, and this is where everything becomes even more intense. Another event, another conversation, or another realization has recently forced them to see exactly what they could lose if they continue hiding. It did not merely make them miss you. It made them confront the possibility of a future where you are genuinely happy without them. And their reaction to that possibility revealed the truth they had been trying hardest to deny. My beloved child, don't scroll away from what comes next, because the secret is no longer simply that your soulmate cared more than they showed. The deeper secret is what they are now considering doing, because they finally understand that loving someone silently can eventually become the same as letting them go, and they are beginning to realize they may not be ready to let you go at all.